All right, so we have the next generation of the plot format is going to be discussed today between the two principal developers or guys that are working on the next generation of this technology for Chia. So Dr. Nick, who is the one who created Dr. Plotter and was swooped up by CNI, they are going to discuss this in detail. And I actually thought that this blog post went into some very good detail regarding the details of the next generation of proof of space, which I hope brings us back from being this weird hybrid GPU chain and sort of skating straight into proof of work and back into proof of space and time. Lucas, do you think you'll have time to tune into this today?
Absolutely. I have it on my calendar. I have an alarm set. I very much wanted to listen to it. I won't probably understand as much of the detail that they get into, but I definitely wanted to follow it. I saw that you had posted on Monkey Zoo that you wanted to break it down afterwards, so I definitely wanted to get your take on it as soon as possible. Also, you say maybe can you tell me what you see as the problem that this is trying to solve now? I mean, you say a hybrid of a GPU train, a proof of work chain. Is that what Chia has become?
I think so. I mean, the idea that it was a proof of space and time chain was right, at least for the first year, 2 years, when we saw the ability to have GPU compression and bit dropping, which we had talked about with Bram, like that came up during our conversation in our interview with him. When that technology started to come up, it definitely shifted the chain to this what I would call a hybrid GPU chain. You definitely saw the rise of this type of farming in the Chia space. So as soon as that started happening, it was way more profitable for the biggest players in Chia to do it that way. Because if you took the effort to replot to a compressed format and coupled with a GPU, you saw such outsized gains in how much money you could make, how much profitability you could have on the chain, that it it shifted the narrative. It shifted the ball completely in that direction. And so Mad Max and Dr. Nick and everything that's happened on the chain has moved it so far in that direction that at this point, I'd say it's not even that low energy anymore. So this effort to try to swing it back in the other direction is critical for Chia if it wants to maintain the narrative of being green and being able to say it's low energy, because most of what I think is happening right now is swung in this direction. However, with the drop in price, now that's called into question again, because if you have a certain price of Chia, where we were very recently at like 50, $60, to be at $14, that's a real a tough row to hoe, as they say in the world of farming. So this is going to be critical, but it also puts Chia on like a longer timeline again. I think a lot of people were hoping that this was going to be a chain that was going to rise up, something within like a 5 year timeline. Now it's looking like if this goes down this way, this is on a 1.5 to 2 year timeline to get this thing fully rolled out and implemented. And it's a hard fork, at some point, if they want to say that this is the only thing that's allowed, and that will cause a significant churn on net space. Because I think if you look at some of the rock solid net space that's in Chia has just been sitting there for a long time because people have it turned on and they just sort of aren't even looking at it, and they aren't thinking about profitability or anything like that because they plotted OG plots a long time ago, set it and forgot about it and just let it go because they had whatever energy cost distribution that they had at that point, and haven't really touched it. Then there's been the more active people who have been replotting and doing more interesting stuff. And And those people that have been looking at it more carefully have slowly been capitulating as they say, this doesn't even make sense. I chased profitability. I tried to do this and it just didn't make sense. And now we're seeing reports of, larger farms capitulating and shutting off. And it's been a gradual decline, even though you haven't seen net space go down that much. I mean, it hasn't been dramatic, but it's definitely been falling off at a pretty reasonable cadence. And so you've seen this, like gradual erosion of the net space. What it was at its peak, I think at like something like 34 exabytes, and then pop back up to 26, and now we're sub 22 again now.
Well, it's disheartening to see um, the GPUs enter the sort of take over the hard drives as the consensus support, or as the main tool for consensus support for Chia. But there's other things going on here that just stymie me, and that's in the larger conversation about crypto. Crypto is finally turning heads. We're in an election here in the United States, and crypto seems to be a growing issue on the at the forefront of the policy agendas of the candidates. But this notion of a both strategic asset reserve in Bitcoin, and not only that, but of limitless energy. Like, I was in a political space for quite some time yesterday with a lot of Bitcoiners and politicos in it, and they all believe in that there's going to be limitless energy, whether it come from UFOs or whether Tesla crawls out of the grave and whispers in somebody's ear, or whether it comes from good old nuclear energy. And I think that those predictions of the future are wrong. But I don't know. I think that Chia is sort of like is the belief in that possibility of the future is stalling out. I guess something else that's going on, and a problem with Chia, and that is the lack of adoption for use cases. I mean, where are the CBDCs? Where are the algorithmic DBDCs? This I think is another issue that is confronting Chia. I am glad to see that. I mean, even at the cost of a hard fork, I think it's very important to continue to pursue a low energy consensus mechanism, because I think that's going to continue to be a growing issue in the world. And while I do believe in technological advances in energy production, I see more of blockchain serving as a tool to account for and make our use of energy more efficient.
I mean, this is a reboot of the chain in some sense, right? And I think you're right that Chia needs to find its use cases, and I think that there was some amount of getting over the hump of people being able to actually program this thing, which I think we're there at. So I'm seeing a lot of teams that are doing things on Chia that are not. It's not possible to do it in other places, and it really comes down to Chia Lisp and the smart contract programming language, coupled with the CoinCept model being the competitive advantage. But this baseline is really difficult to get past. When you have a low coin price and you have capitulation that's happening, it makes it difficult to garner support around launching a project on a chain that seems like it's not going in the direction that people want. So that, I think, is something that needs to be corrected if you're going to see major projects launch on it. And I think we've already seen some really cool projects launched on it, and they're definitely using the chain and it's working the way they want. I would, point at the whole RWA Matthew Hintz project of, Soul Slot that I'm getting the name wrong. All of a sudden, I just
Soul's Lot.
Solomon's Lot.
I know.
Yeah.
How unfortunate for Soul. Let's not speak the chain that shall not be named.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate name, and think to try to remember it because like Solomon, it's not in the full URL, so it's like you got to try to remember it's Soul, and then it's not Solana.
I also think about Solomon dividing the child, but
as far as saying, like look at when that project was launched. He told us they were in stealth for 3-something years. So if you were to approach investors and say, "Oh yeah, we're going to launch on top of this chain at this point," you'd get some hard looks. It's like, really? Why aren't you doing this on Base? Why aren't you doing this on Solana? Like, why aren't you doing this on whatever other chain? And then you'd have to get into, well, do you really care about decentralization? Do you really care about self-custody, like a lot of the stuff that matters on the Chia chain? And then you just sort of get a lot of askew glances like, okay, but what's really going on with this chain? And I think that's the tough part, and that's the part that if this can help get that solved, get this back to a low energy chain, recapture the minds and hearts of the people who wanted to be here for the low energy narrative, then you have something to stand on. And I think this other part's been solved, right? Like there are people who really know how to program Chia Lisp at this point. And even projects like what Michael Taylor's doing, I don't know if you saw his announcement the other day, but he basically says that he's got it cooked at this point. Everything that was wrong with IPFS and everything that was hard about data layer, they pretty well just like reworked it. That was a huge announcement that sort of went under the radar.
I really want to have Michael on to talk about where he's at as soon as we can. But I think that Chia is I'm amazed at how the narrative has both turned towards, in a positive way, towards crypto, and yet how wrong it is. I mean, even with the excitement about AI that's been going on for over a year, ever since whatever ChatGPT and those advancements were made and released, I think that it tells a false narrative about the amount of electricity that's available. And I do understand that there is surplus electricity generation, and that that there's variable amount of demand, and that there is a possibility for inserting consensus support for blockchains in that variable amount. But that doesn't mean that lower energy consumption chains are not going to me be much more preferable. And then coupled with, yes, the smart coin chipset design of Chia, and the robustness of the language of Chia Lisp, I'm dismayed that so many people who are coming to crypto are looking at Bitcoin and saying, oh, crypto is just a strategic reserve asset. It's a financial instrument. I think, though, that understanding of the use of crypto is going to be quickly eclipsed by understanding and adopting CBDCs or digital currencies, I should say, because there's 4 letters in CBDC, and 3 of them, it seems, a lot of people really want. And it's the centralization part that they don't want, and yet Chia is decentralized. It gives the world a chance to have CBDCs in both consensus support, but
we don't have the tech on Chia to do that. I mean, we asked Bram that question and Gene that question. He said, "Is it ready to do this?" And it's like not to do the retail one, which I think is what you're talking about. Like, it's just not there yet, and they gotta they got to build out some more tech before that's really going to be possible, and it's really not possible much of anywhere, right? I don't think there's really a chain that could possibly handle or displace what's currently going on in the credit card network. It's just not, it's not ready for that.
Nowhere that I've seen, but Chia is by far the front runner in getting to that point. You know, there's other things that have happened in just the last couple of days that I think will also give the world pause and give politicians pause, give policymakers and bureaucrats who are behind nation state currencies, and that is the hack on Iran. You know, Iran's financial system was taken down. You know, even did you happen to see that the Social Security Administration was hacked and all of our Social Security numbers were released? Or
yeah, and not to split hairs on that one, but it's a subcontractor that I don't think it was the actual administration, but yeah, I did see it.
Well, I didn't dig deeply into it. As I said yesterday, I was on a political / Bitcoiners space for quite some time.
But along those lines, so there was also this this group that got spun up, or you know, there's been some attempt by the Harris campaign to rally crypto, which I think has fallen very flat. Mark Cuban seems to be involved in it, and this was a good summation of what happened in the space and the discussion. And if you look at the people who are even mentioned here, you know, Mark Cuban and Chuck Schumer, it's like this was not well received. And what, you know, the Biden and Harris administration seems to be doing with selling off the Bitcoin reserves that the US has because they confiscated them from various entities and whatever, it just seems like this is a false narrative that they're not going to be able to engage with the community in this way. And I think that this is not going over well. And I think based on, you know, the summary that I read, what happened with the Crypto4Harris group, this was a complete train wreck.
I missed Crypto4Harris. I did see, I saw the name floated about, and I rolled my eyes because I thought I'm still getting the tweets from the Democrats of the Financial Services Committee who are adamantly against it, and Elizabeth Warren who is adamantly against it. So I thought that it would fall flat, and unless it's Harris for crypto, there's probably not going to be a lot of traction there. I did see
she's really got to show and demonstrate some commitment to the ideas and the technologies and what's being presented here. And I think that's unlikely to happen. I don't think that she's gonna, in her campaign, are gonna turn.
Conversely, it's not that the Democrats aren't that at least some of the Democrats aren't picking up and understanding the advancement in technology, but who is for the CBDC with the Fed? The Democrats engaged in Senate banking and financial services. So they're just mum about it right now because they see a very different use case for crypto. And quite honestly, I think it might be closer to a better application for limiting the inflation of currency that the government engages in. Because as we said before, if you just put Bitcoin in a vault next to gold, we're not doing anything about limiting the government's ability to stretch and flex the number of dollars that are based on that. So, but with regards to the popular narrative about what the use case for crypto is right now, they're not gonna jump on that bandwagon. And you know, also look back to FTX before that collapse. They were very interested in technologies that could control people's currency, but as we well know, Chia was made not to control people's currency, but to control the government's ability to manipulate it, or at least to make it visible and and logarithmic. Did you see? I know you did. That we talked about earlier the deal that was signed between Coinbase and the United States Marshal Service, and the government actually transferred some amount of Bitcoin over to Coinbase either yesterday or sometime in the last few days.
10,000, yeah.
10,000 Bitcoin. What was that? $600 million.
Yep.
So I heard lamentations and gnashing of teeth from Bitcoiners about that. Wigs were ripped off of heads, and they brought up Germany and how stupid it was for Germany to sell their Bitcoin, and now that the United States was following suit, I'm not surprised.
Well, it's hot on the heels of major banks all buying Bitcoin. I don't know if you saw that, but like there are, major financial institutions that are essentially just like, if you're going to sell those coins, we'll take them. Like it's happening in real time. So as we discussed over multiple shows, watching Germany fumble their bag, I don't think that the US is going to be able to sell off, or I don't think they'll sell it off as fast, but I think that they're going to lament selling off those coins. And they're, like the movements that have been articulated by Senator Loomis and other people regarding setting up some sort of a, Bitcoin as the backing for the dollar or some kind of strategic reserve. I think they're going to look back on this and say, wow, look at how lamentably stupid this was to sell this off at this point in time.
Well, what about the aspect of it of civil asset forfeiture? I mean, it's interesting that I don't know, libertarians, the crypto community talks about sovereignty, owning our own money, but all of a sudden they're really excited about the government owning a large portion of a cryptocurrency, and not only that, but they didn't buy it; they seized it. So I just find it quite the conundrum that the crypto community has gotten behind this notion of the government should be the one that's holding Bitcoin.
It's this idea that we should go back to backing the dollar with hard assets. I don't know if it's anything other than that. That's the idea, and it's been espoused as this fiat thing that we had is not really working anymore. We're no longer able to just export all of our spending to the rest of the world and have it be absorbed. Like we're in a different world now. I think that's just kind of where things are at. But this is the stuff that I've been watching, Goldman Sachs and other major financial institution and banks saying that they're taking on positions in Bitcoin. And to Goldman Sachs, this is not a big position. This is tiny, but it shows that there is pretty widespread adoption, that everybody is starting to take some amount of a position on Bitcoin. So to see the U.S. government fumbling their very large position on Bitcoin is distressing.
Well, but if the United States Treasury is selling off debt that was created in bills passed and sent to them by Congress for billions and trillions of dollars, and they are distributing those to banks, and banks are buying that Bitcoin, I don't. The United States has found something convenient to purchase with dollars that they've created, and it still doesn't. Backing a currency with a hard asset still doesn't answer the question of how do you prevent government from doing more of that, of creating more dollars to go out and buy other hard assets. I mean, we can buy every emerald, ruby, element of lithium and platinum, gold, and silver, and put it in a vault and still make more money, more dollars to go out and buy more things, or to buy more land and take advantage of the people who don't have the heavy bag. So this is something that the crypto community is going to have to come to terms with. Like even again, in discussions with Bitcoiners, I say, what's the correct amount of inflation that should occur? And they say, oh, 2%. And I say, well, if you believe in hard money instead of soft money, shouldn't it be 0%?
I think that there are a lot of people who would take a hard position against the 2%. I know that Jack Mallers has said that that seems completely unreasonable to have a 2% inflation. So it's not universal that's the right answer. I think that that's an answer that is not thoughtful.
Well, I didn't think so either. And to me, the answer should be the percent of the inflation of a money, a state's money, should be based on the amount of things that are produced by the people who are represented by that, the people, the land, the resources that are represented by it. And right now we have that system. We have it set it backwards, just sort of some expectation that there will be 2% growth in the future. Really, that's just making more money to soften political realities. So politicians can go sit at a table and say, we need more money to put in Social Security. Oh, we'll just use a little bit of this extra 2% that we've created, because there's a lag in the understanding of how much money has been created. Do you know where this notion of 2% comes from?
I don't know why that's the target, but I know that the idea around Keynesian economics is that if you're going to produce a currency that people are going to want to spend, it can't appreciate in value. Otherwise, there's no incentive to spend it unless you're putting it into something that gets a higher return than whatever you do just by sitting on your hands. And so this idea that you have to have some amount of nominal inflation to keep the base of the economy sort of spending and moving around is the canonical understanding that I've heard by why there's a target of like 2 or 3% inflation.
Well, and it does discourage hodling, because whatever you hodl, if you're not putting it back into the economy, it's actually losing value, and that's done very intentionally. It comes from Australia. Australia is the one who came up, or the Australian Central Bank was the one who came up with this magical 2% number. And if I remember correctly, either the broad understanding of it or the reasoning that economists told themselves going into that was how much gold was mined a year. We're just broadly matching the amount of gold that miners increase the supply by every year. And I think that's such a limited understanding of what money is for and what actually.
Well, even if they were matching it, right? Even if that was the case in gold mining, just as in Bitcoin mining, you have a production cost, whereas with fiat currency and increasing it by 2%, it doesn't track because they don't have the same sort of a cost basis.
True, very true. And part of, I just think that narrative about why 2% inflation is absolutely artificial, and inflation is something that or the inflation of the monetary supply and is something that nobody actually wants to dig into. Like, what is interest? Why inflation? I'd say nobody ever delves into, why do we put a price on time? What is that? And it is interest, but we dig into it here, but I don't hear that discussion enough, certainly by economists or politicians, and politicians should be asking exactly that question. But
another major thing that was happening yesterday was one of our favorite guys here, the Cancel Coco, held a space where he and Bobby Kennedy and Nicole Shanahan were having a discussion. And one interesting thing that came up was that there had been some reports that Kennedy couldn't gain more followers, that if you tried to follow his account, it just would immediately unfollow it, and that was capped at 3 million or whatever. And so apparently this shadow ban, or this thing that was buried inside the algorithm somewhere, has been removed, and now he can gain followers again and gain more traction. So I thought that this was a pretty interesting development. I know that there are definitely things in the X algorithm that still seem to be there. You know, we were discussing this a bit, that there are probably certain words that you say, certain things that you may mention that get you onto this. You can't gain more followers, you can't gain traction, you can't actually get views on what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I've never botted my account or paid for one follower ever, but when we say certain words here, I both get shadow banned and I lose followers. I lose a couple of followers a day, and I don't know how that happens. Maybe it's my tweets are unpalatable to people. Actually, that could be it. But very good news that Kennedy Twitter finally found that. I guess Kennedy said that he had to repeatedly tweet proof of people who had followed him being removed without removing themselves from following his account to Elon directly, for Elon to ride the Twitter's developers to finally find out what was going on with his account.
I think that this shows that we're not quite at the point where we've developed the right systems just yet. This is still too centralized. The control and the algorithm being in the hands of a relatively limited number of people is not, this is not good for society. It's not good for the algorithm to be able to present this stuff, whether it be on Facebook or Google or X. Like, this brokered interface to the internet is, this has got to change. This has to change. Like, the fact that you have to go beg Elon Musk to allow for people to see and hear somebody they're interested in is just, this is not the way.
Right. Elon is a king in his very own right. And yes, he tries to be fair, but no, it's not the best solution. We mentioned Michael Taylor and what he's done with Data Layer earlier. I know that Chia Social was very forefront in his mind, especially on or a Chia solution for decentralized communication. Hopefully that with the better version of Data Layer that he's built, that will be closer to fruition, because it's not just X and X. Since Elon has bought it, he's tried to bring I don't know, more fairness to that. But I mean, even that said, it's not as if they still don't rely on a I mean, they still have to make money on a capitalist model, and so you can still at the very least, you can go out and pay them a couple of bucks, and your tweets will magically appear in front of people's eyes, and that's not true to what people really care about. So it's another form of manipulation. Also going on with Google and Polymarket. You questioned recently what was going on with the results of Polymarket. I don't remember if it was on a show, but I remember that you said this doesn't seem right. There must be something going on that with someone trying to manipulate the results of some of the odds that Polymarket was showing for various candidates, Kamala Harris being top of the list, and I saw a web sleuth that purports to have found evidence that is indeed going on.
I was just trying to pull that up, actually. So give me just a second. I know that there was a post recently about talking about opening up Polymarket more from an API perspective, and also trying to get AI bots into it, which I find to be a fascinating idea. So let me get that manipulation of Polymarket pulled up 1 second.
I can't remember which account it was, but not surprising. And we talked about how, you know, one of the problems with Wikipedia, and we love Wikipedia, but it requires constant vigilance, because there are those, when anyone can go and add what information that they want, you constantly have to check it. So and an aside, community notes, please, any listeners, never write a no note needed community note, because it's not how the system should work. Yeah, here we go. Polymarket.
I think this is the manipulation thing that I saw, that there are thoughts that what's happening here is not genuine and not reflective of what's really going on in the state of the campaign or the market. How much money does it actually take to manipulate something like this? It really depends, right, on what the current bet on Polymarket is, how much you want to pay, and whether this is really driving some kind of a narrative or not. Maybe.
Well, this
I
really
don't know. It
doesn't.
seems like a big cost.
I was just going to speak real quick that this really doesn't surprise me that these numbers are so far manipulated. When you look at how much Kamala Harris has been paying influencers to basically tell her side of the story, and the fact that the Democrats can pay for the media to show what they want to, and the shadow banning that's going on, it's kind of that the way you were describing it in Minnesota, that they just perceive this narrative that Kamala Harris is so great, that she has so many fans, that she can fill up all these concerts and all these big old stadiums with so many people. But in reality, it's just not true. And they're just making up these manipulated numbers to make people feel like it's okay to believe what they are telling them to believe, because everybody else believes that also.
Yeah, I think that we do have to. I mean, look at it this way: if they were spending money on advertising, at least they have a chance of the money coming back to them if they're putting it onto Polymarket, right?
Well, so right now it's at $600 million. So if you want to start influencing this, you have to throw money into the pot on the side that you think is correct, right? So this is the bet. So right now you're in a winning position if you start betting on Trump to win this thing, because it's below the threshold, right? So like if you put money on the Harris side and Trump wins, then you're going to lose money. Like that's kind of how this works. But if you look at this from a just like how much money does it take to swing this thing one direction or another, it starts to get a lot harder to swing it once it gets bigger and bigger. It's the basic way that I understand how this market works.
Well, they have. I don't know. It's a more direct way for big money to influence politics, is if more people are paying attention to the betting odds. And I've heard for years that if you really wanted to know what the best odds for a winner were, to go to Las Vegas and find out what the odds were for a candidate there. Now there's a website where people can go and look at that. I think that Polymarket will probably gain in traction, and not just Kamala's campaign, but I would imagine the Trump campaign looks at it too. The thing that surprises me most is that Bobby doesn't appear on here at all. I don't know. I don't know how to make that system better. We should make a rule that nobody can bet on anything. Look, there's Bobby, less than 1%. I don't think that's believable. And why is Michelle Obama on here? When do the Democrats have their national convention, so we know who their nominee is going to be anyway?
Why anybody's on here? I think it's just because that's the way that this question was set up.
Yeah. Well, I know who I'd put my money on, but Kennedy also I thought the shadow ban interesting with regards to his campaign, but he also lost ballot access to New York. And while we were talking about that, and I was thinking about I think I saw a tweet. I'm not sure where I saw, but he said that he expected that the DNC spent $10 million in the lawsuits against him to keep him from the ballot. Wouldn't it have been better for the DNC to just put $10 million on Kamala Harris at Polymarket? So hopefully Bobby gets access to the ballot in New York State. I couldn't believe that. I can't believe that a judge, that anyone would deny him with the outsized exposure that he's had in this election, the gaining traction that he's had in this election, that a judge would go out on such a limb to ruin their reputation with upholding the DNC's case against him. And Kennedy makes the case that he does live with his wife Cheryl in California, but maintains a residence in a friend's home in New York, that he has his voter registration is in New York and has never changed. I thought, when I saw this, I thought, well, here we're going to see if the judge upholds the DNC's case, they're going to play this game of words, and but between what the question of what is a home and what is a house. And for the majority of Americans who either rent or own a house and live in that house, it would seem cut and dried. But whenever you have enough money to have houses in several states, the definition of where you apply your residence becomes a little murkier. And I know that Kennedy also mentioned that some states make the distinction by where you're registered to vote. And I thought that was probably a great solution to the question. But at the very least, Kennedy has maintained that a residence that he calls home in New York State. So I don't know.
Did you get a chance to see this clip or this interview?
I did.
This to me just resonates because this has happened before, twice. Then recent memory. This wasn't like a long time ago. This is exactly the same political machine. And at the end of this discussion, of this little clip, which it's always nice when somebody can grab the salient point and sort of summarize it for you, is a pretty cool part of how X gets people to engage. And like, you can watch a 2-hour interview, but also it's nice if you can just get right to the heart of it. And Bernie, in this clip where he's going through this interview, he gets asked, are we still in a democracy? And he says something just shocking: yes and no. And then they start to talk about how it's really an oligarchy. And he seemed pretty resigned to that instead of being outraged by it. I was outraged by this. I'm like, I know we're living in an oligarchy and I don't like it. Like, how can he sit there and just like say, well, that's just how it is. And, they got a bunch of people to drop out of the race and they decided it was going to be Biden. And it's like, who the hell are you to make that decision for who is obviously a candidate that was liked by a large number of people in the United States and had been winning primaries? This is not the way this is supposed to work.
Well, but I think go ahead, Rusty.
I was just going to input something real quick, Lucas, on the point before, how you're saying where the taxes come from. I have a story that's kind of based around that. When I was in the military, they always say, you got to vote from the state that you're registered from and where you came from, even though no matter where you're stationed. And so when I was voting, I always voted that I was voted from New Mexico, and that was my place of residency, and that's where my vote counted from, and that's where I paid my taxes to. And I still have the California government trying to send me letters for taxes unpaid for the year 2006 when I was in the military, and like half the year I was in Japan. And I paid my taxes. I paid them for the state of New Mexico, but California says that I owe them taxes and that they deserve the taxes also. And I've never paid those, and they still send me letters about it. And every time I was late, I was like, well, if I go and I can dispute it, it's basically the military thing, and I don't know if it's something that they didn't understand on their end or what's going on, but I'm not going to pay taxes twice.
Well, either New Mexico should stand up for you as their citizen, and especially as somebody who served in the military and was called out of New Mexico on that duty. But I would imagine if Bobby gets the election nomination, he might be doing something about the vagaries with regards to residency and status in these United States. Grant, you mentioned that that the question was put to Bernie: are we still living in a democracy? But the answer is we never were living in a democracy. Like this fascination and discussion about democracy is a psyop that's put forth by politicians who are taking advantage of people. We are in a democratic republic, or even better put, a union of democratic republics, and part of that
constitutional republic, if we're going to split hairs, right? Isn't that the correct term?
Oh, well, let's dye them too. Let's not just split them. Let's add some conditioner and a little bit of color. But yes, a union of democratic constitutional republics, and the Constitution being part of the notion that a piece of paper replaced the king. But I think it's very important to remember that we're not in a democracy because we have very we have different levels of government with different powers assigned to them, and there's a German word that I wish you could look up. Look up rule of law and the German concept, where that came from, because that's where you get the idea back in Europe of replacing the king with a document, sort of leading out of the Magna Carta. But I can't. It's right. It starts with an R. It's Riksdag or something like that. Not Reichstag. But anyway, this notion that we live in a democracy, that there's an idea that rides on that we, that the popular vote determines the president, and that's not how the United States was set up. And I know people get upset about that, talk about changing that. I don't know if changing it's such a good idea.
I could only come up with Magna Carta. I wasn't not sure what other Reichstag thing couldn't get it to come up for that.
Let me look it up. I'm gonna mute up so you guys don't hear the clackety clack of my typing.
Yeah, no worries. As far as it being a constitutional republic versus the democracy and the usage of the words and the terms, I think that some of our language has drifted over time. We used to use very precise language. We used to use very precise words, and now we've gotten away from that. I think it really what they were trying to discuss, and if I give them the benefit of the doubt, I don't think that they were trying to move the government in a direction away from the Constitution or something like that, but rather saying you're supposed to have this idea of the people being able to provide self-governance, and it's not just some small cadre of individuals who wield a large influence in both economics and politics. And if you look at the definition of really what that sort of a style of government is they said this is an oligarchy. Where they're precise on the one side, they're imprecise on the other. And I think if you were to say constitutional republic, I don't even think most people would understand really what that means and how it differs from democracy. But it used to be taught. It was definitely something that was emphasized in American education, but I think it's gotten less over the years that this was the dividing line and how bad democracies really are in their scope. So it's about this emphasis on constitutional republic being a a preferred form of government and why that's so much better in the execution.
Well, but when you put God into a constitution or put the king into a constitution, there's an argument over who interprets what that means. And by the way, I put the link up over on the right. It's Rechtsstaat. It is Rechtsstaat. Just to know how to pronounce it or spell it. Somebody who speaks German, tell me how to say this. Don't you dare click on that sound thing because I don't want to know right now. But you're right. But on the heels of the Tina Peters case and our conversation with Rachel, I've been thinking a lot about lawfare. I always think a lot about lawfare, but I was also digging into the Constitutional Convention, and yesterday I saw somebody posted up a used Grok's AI generation to superimpose Trump in a wig and early American dress for a mock-up of a painting where he's there with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And I thought, it's very interesting that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were not at the Constitutional Convention. And John Adams was and I thought that very interesting because both, we're all very familiar with the Jeffersonian ideas of republic and of an agrarian economy and keeping law simple and restarting government and limiting the power of government. But John Adams was the one who brought us the ideas of how important it was to have a trial by jury, and not only that, but the presumption of innocence. And the Constitutional Convention was held by 55 lawyers, and I thought it very interesting that two of the largest proponents or figures who were proponents of autonomy, of personal autonomy in this emerging in the new government were absent, and that's because they were the ambassadors to France and Great Britain at the time, or England at the time. So, I think that part of our political conversation since the adoption of the Constitution has been that a democracy fixes things, but a democracy, as Plato and Socrates tell us, you engage in a democracy, and before long you just have to fill up the docket with all sorts of questions that nobody can answer. Like the path of a democracy is one to arguing over nuances that don't mean anything, and that's part of the problem. So
I didn't expect that we were going to go here, but along this same line, did you get a chance to see this where it's Justice Gorsuch was speaking about how you oftentimes don't find yourself in a jury trial and how important juries are? I mean, this is just on point with what you're talking about.
Oh no, I'd love to hear it. I don't know if you have time to swap over your audio and play it, but Gorsuch, and Gorsuch is from Boulder.
I'm always pronouncing it wrong. Gorsuch, it just doesn't look like that's how you pronounce that word.
Gorsuch, and to me, where justices are from and what their religion is always very important because it sort of informs so much of their worldview. Gorsuch I think he was from Nebraska, but moved to Colorado and was on the bench in Boulder, Colorado, or from Boulder, Colorado. And Tina Peters even appealed to Gorsuch for to throw out the case that was brought against her by the state of Colorado, and he did not. I don't know if he chose to hear it or just denied it outright. But yeah, play what he said.
Okay, give me 1 second here.
But it is we. I hate to give you a homework assignment.
Turn it up if you can.
It is we the people. Those are the first three words of the Constitution. And you are the sovereign in this country. And if you don't care, it ain't going to happen. Nothing's going to change. But it is amazing what ordinary people can do to affect change.
Wait a minute. That's this other part.
When you make in the book is how Americans are 10 times more likely to wind up before an administrative judge than a federal court. And in these administrative judges, they play prosecutor and judge. And how different is that from the federal judiciary, and why is it increasing so much on the regulatory and the executive side?
Yeah. So, what are administrative judges? How might you encounter them? If you're regulated like Marty Hahn, for example, the magician, and you are prosecuted by the agency, many of them have the opportunity, rather than to bring their charges against you in court, they can bring them before their own employees, okay? For civil matters. You know, if they want just money from you, just money, right? Or to close your business or to take away your license, right? Your livelihood. They call themselves administrative law judges. We used to call them hearing officers, but now they like to wear robes and you know, they have the whole thing. And do you get a jury? No jury in those cases. No jury. That's gone too. And yes, today, according to Professor Jonathan Turley, you are 10 times more likely to wind up in front of one of those judges than a real judge and a jury of your peers. And so I do write about this. This is part of what's happened and changed in my lifetime in our law.
My friend and brother in the
Clip, and we'll get it posted into the comments so that if it was a little quiet, I got to figure out how to get my audio right so I can actually play clips so it's not so quiet. I don't know what to do.
Well, we'll figure it out. But I'm glad that you played it and we listened to it. And I think that more so than turning towards concepts of legislative democracy or electoral democracy, we need to be having a conversation about where are the juries. And because the juries are the true check on judicial power, because listen to what he's describing there. You know, whenever there is a guild that a group of people, lawyers, the legal profession, who have taken over and appointed themselves, well, you don't understand this, or legislatures have got it wrong, then we have an outsized problem. And part of those who foresaw this problem coming, John Adams, top of the list, wanted to address it with juries, and you know, the jury trial, and the juries need, you know, there's also this conflation between the terms law and legislation. And a law is not a law until it's practiced by people. You know, when you go to court, it's one thing to produce something statutory, but a greater bar of law, what's that word, bar? A greater threshold of law is like how many people are engaging in it. You know, there's legislation on the books in every town, state, and in the federal government, and a lot of people pay no attention to them.
I
might
think that's commonly referred to case law, right?
No, case law is comes to us from this notion of what stare decisis, of let it stand, as opposed.
Yeah, but I thought this was more of like a law isn't a law until it's been tried, it's been found to be valid, like statutory law versus something that's been established as precedent. Isn't that the
Well,
dividing? What should
yeah.
I be looking up instead? If I've got this wrong, I'll
No, I think you do have a law. I don't necessarily think of it in terms of case law. I think of it in terms of law versus legislation. But yes, something that's been established as a precedent in a court, because it's been demonstrated that this is actually happening. But
this is where jury nullification comes in, because it allows juries to weigh in on laws. It can say, hey, I don't even think this should be a law. This isn't right. Let's just get rid of this.
Absolutely, and that's what I think has fundamentally been lost in America. It's the method by which, this notion of Jefferson. You should be able, like, government needs to refresh itself, and we need to have a way of getting legislation that was not a good idea, not put to use, or society has changed since it was enacted. That we need a way to get that out of the system, so that prosecutors or people who have standing to bring a case aren't abusing legislation that nobody actually believes in. But again, because judges and lawyers both don't want to be wrong, and want to abuse the authority of what is it, Rex thought, God in the writing, then they have hoodwinked jurors out of the understanding that they had the power to affect what the law is. So rather than talking about democracy, I wish that jury was at the front of everybody's mind. And it's also, whenever I think about the problems that we have with the Supreme Court and the argument over whether they call balls and strikes or engage in politics, is the check on the power of the federal court should have been that the judges that were presiding there were also calling up juries, because in truth they do get to exercise their morals and the way that they see the world, and that's not a bad thing. But it should be checked by reliance on a jury instead of the tenure of their position there.
Well, we're on the top of the hour. Ready to call it?
Yeah, I'm ready to call it. Did you want to set up a bit of our conversation for tomorrow, or do you just want to surprise everybody with it?
I think we'll just surprise everybody.
All right. Well, I'll bring candles and a cake tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow.